to get reaction from people that you don't want. So I'm employing everybody that knows Stephen Yaxley, aka Tommy Robinson, sit down and tell him to wind his neck in. You're not even, I wouldn't even call you an advocate for your cause. You're not even an advocate for your cause. You're a frightened you. You're a scared you. I need to get my hand on this brother because when you know a brother's shook, I'm like, what, Yaxley? What? Stephen Yaxley? He's a man in Luton. My man, that done. That train, I swear he goes to that, bro, man, be outside don't even start making me. Lads, if you play football, do you think man cares, bro? Do you think man football, like, how do you think that's gonna go? You get what I'm saying to you? That's how I know it's an agenda. That's how I know it's an agenda, and that's how I know they want to just undermine BLM. How is it gonna work, bro? How is that ever gonna happen? What, football lads? Do you think this is one of your little idiot protests where you lot go there and scream? You think this is a football match? Yeah, come on then. Go on then. What, you think that's what it's going to be? It's not going to be that. Someone's going to get rubbed out. You know this. And we're not going to go down that road and go and, because that's what you lot want. Man, come there, rob out a couple of you lot. That's exactly what will happen. Exactly what will happen. Someone will get robbed out. Facts. I'll put money on it. That you lot come there with that energy. Somebody will get rubbed out over, like, definitely get rubbed out. Man's not in the, what do you think man's going to do? Come there with knuckle dusters. Be serious. The point I'm making is this, black people, to my people anyway, don't fall for these tricks, yeah? Don't fall for these traits. Now, as you can see, is the news talking anything about Grenfell? This weekend is the anniversary for Grenfell, Saturday, specifically. So explain this to me now. Explain this to me now. Money on it. Agenda, just as a logic, just as a neutral person. We're marching all week, nothing gets said, right? The Grenfell anniversary is coming up. It makes sense, there's going to be a memorial for the people that lost their lives, which there should be a memorial for people that lost their lives on Saturday. There's going to be a unity march because there's still a lot of families that, still not had their justice from that situation. And then we get this puppet come. Right. By the way, lads, on Saturday, why don't you lot all come out? Why are you not trying to do that? You're trying to dominate the headlines. This is the Madeleine McCann.
All right.
All right, so yeah, this is Transparency and Merit. This is Brian and Joe. There have been a lot of, a lot of protests around the world. One of them being in London, and a lot of historical statues were vandalized and the like. And the EDL has come out, and a lot of British veterans have come out to protect their monuments. So, yeah. Now, I think I did put a video up there of the riots taking place, and I've done a few things on Twitter. If you go to Twitter and you go BLM versus EDL. EDL was basically started by Tommy Robinson. Is not his real name, but BDL was started by Tommy Robinson after the murder of a soldier by Islamists, and it was basically to fight some of the no-go zone areas in England, and how bad the no-go zones areas are, and how wrong they are is yet to be seen. So we're just looking at everything right now and just seeing, what exactly is going on with regards to the riots, with regards to what the whole social relationship is with England and its minorities. Now, England, unlike America, is an ethnically based nation. We just got Zach in here. We'll see. Zach, are you there? Can we hear you?
Can you?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. So I rebooted, reconnected wires, and then I cleared the cookies. I I'm not sure what did it. And then finally I changed mics, and I tried all of that in different orders, and I don't know which one fixed it.
Well,
So I'm good.
The only thing
Well,
that I did was I made cookies, and they were delicious.
Yes,
Did you eat all of them?
I ate them all.
Next time you could send me some by mail. I'd appreciate that. Thanks, Joe.
I hope your kids don't get to them first.
Welcome on in. And so Brian was just kind of starting on a little path there. Why don't you go ahead and...
Well, I'll start in because the EDL is not that well known here in the States, but the EDL was the EDL was started. The EDL was started by a gentleman. It's not his real name, but it started by Tommy Robinson, who did it as a response after Muslims murdered beheaded an English soldier, and now we can't hear you. Hopefully, when you're speaking, you're on mute. Oh, you're on mute. So your mic is on mute, by the way, Zach.
Martha brought me some Angry Orchard, so she forgot that they need a bottle opener. So I'm trying to get a bottle opener so I can have a beverage while we're talking.
That's a worthwhile.
That's always good.
So
So
I'm gonna be on mute for another second.
Very well. So as we are talking, there have been, like I said, demonstrations around the world, including England, and a lot of British monuments were defaced. Do you want to show just a couple of the rioting that happened in Britain, Joe? I don't know.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It just has to be stopped. We are one. If you want to be one, look at us. Right? I've probably had a fight with that bloke. You know, that one.
A footballer.
Oh, yeah. And we stand together, yeah?
Don't like what's happening, no, mate. There's no need to take the statues down. You know what I mean? It's just like, hey, Capaldi hasn't got a patch on me, mate. Yeah, I'm telling you.
You think I need a haircut?
What?
I think I need a haircut.
You need your teeth brushing, mate.
Thousands of protesters have gathered in central London, Westminster, to protest against the Black Lives Matter movement. They've gathered around the Churchill statue behind me after it was vandalised last weekend. We're here to ask them what they think.
We're here purely, no violence, just to protest about the way our statues are being desecrated or also defaced. And because the police have done nothing about it, we've come here because they won't look after them. And that's basically it. There's nothing to do with colour, creed, anything. It's purely that.
I mean, it's a ridiculous thing. History is what it is. This has turned into a slavery issue from some bloke dying by a corrupt policeman. I didn't see any colour. I see a man die by a corrupt policeman. Yeah? Stop with the colours. Stop it. Because every time you say Black Lives Matter, you are putting a divide in between us all. You are being racist.
All this big thing about colour, race, where you come from, it's just daft, isn't it? Getting out of hand.
Could you tell me what Winston Churchill represents to you? What does he mean to you?
He is father of our country since the war. Without the war, would these people rather have Adolf Hitler's descendants looking after us? This is democracy. And that's what it's supposed to be, a democracy.
We're here to just stop this carnage. We're here peacefully. As you can see, you don't need to rob places. You don't need to hurt people. You just need to turn up and be peaceful.
I'm here today, right, to support the English army. You know what I mean? What's happening, right? I don't agree with it, mate. Statues. It's all over, mate. Yeah, the racism's coming back, mate, because of the fucking BH men.
You can't rewrite or destroy your history. History is there for us to learn from and nurture. We've got what we've got today because of what we've learned from our mistakes and our history. To wipe that out, it's nonsensical.
Wow.
Now, my question is, and we'll go to, would something like this be allowed in Japan? I mean, both England and Japan are ethnically based nations. Would something like this be tolerated in Japan as it is in England? Zach, do you have a comment on that?
Do you mean something like the Black Lives Matter movement, or something like the English
of course.
Defense League?
Well, I guess there may be a Black Lives Matter movement there. There may be something like that. But would they be able to behave in the way? Would a movement like Black Lives Matter be able to behave in a way in Japan as they do in England?
Definitely not. The Japanese culture is very community based, and people who disrupt that or look down upon, they would see it as an affront to their national pride. And it's not about their ethnicity; it's about their cultural identity as Japanese people. They have a very strong sense of who they are and where they came from, the good and the bad. I've never talked to a Japanese person about the atrocities they committed during World War II, or what their culture was like then and how it's changed since then and what they see about that. But I'm sure that they know that history and that they think it's important because it informs who they are today. Just like the guys were saying on the EDL, I thought they were pretty well spoken overall.
Yeah. I mean, look, there are a few hooligans on there, but the thing of it is, and they said it was a Black Lives Matter. They were protesting against Black Lives Matter, which is what the media is spinning it. But it's not against Black Lives Matter. It's against the desecration of their monuments, particularly the one of Winston Churchill. But any of their monuments, you don't have, and it's far leftist, along with a lot of them are not.
Why does BLM want to go after Winston Churchill? I know he wasn't the best guy all around, but was there anything specific due to race was he a racist?
Well, Winston Churchill represents British colonialism.
I see. And so we have to tear down all of that.
Yeah, they want to tear down all of that. The thing is, these individuals, unless you're ethnically British, you came to this country. You are their ancestors came to this country by choice.
And everyone along the way stayed by choice.
That's correct.
Every generation had that choice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look. I mean, and the truth is, you can tell the success of a nation by those that are leaving, by how many people are leaving and how many people are coming in.
Yeah.
And lots of nations with large European populations, that have large people of European heritage populations, are nations where the people are trying to get in.
Yeah, I was just talking on Facebook with somebody who said, is it racist to say go back to your country? And I said, well, I don't agree with the sentiment of go back to your country, because I'm not here to shut down speech, right? That's what the left does, and I hate that. But at the same time, I understand the sentiment that if somebody comes here and just craps all over everything and says we're the worst nation in the world, it does beg the question, well, why are you here? And then I don't think that it's necessarily a racist question. For instance, they were talking specifically about Ilhan Omar, and I'm like, she hates this nation. She says it every day. She's like, it's the worst nation ever. And people are like, well, why don't you go back? And they're like, you're a racist. Well, no. If I walk up to somebody in the supermarket and I see that they're black and I say, go back to your country, that's racist.
Yeah.
Because it's about their skin color. But if Ilhan Omar hates this country, I don't agree with the idea. Well, go back to your own country. I think that that's too simplistic, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not racist for the people who say that to say that.
Well, I remember someone, and there were two. One was a moderate black, and the other, and he goes by the name Some Black Guy, and the other one is Tariq Nasheed. And he asked Tariq Nasheed this question. He said, if you have such a problem with whites, why don't you live in a predominantly black country? You know, like, that's easy. You know, like if I had a problem with a certain race or ethnicity, I would try to live in a place where there's, you certainly may not be able to live in a place that's absolutely, totally one race of people, but you can certainly make it where you can live where it's an extreme majority, and there are plenty of countries out there that are majority one race or the other. Now, Joe, yeah.
Can I jump in on that? I think in terms of like, especially somebody who's been here, like their family's been here for like 5 generations, right? And they've got an extended family that's across multiple states in the U.S. You can say, okay, well, I understand that it's going to cost you to leave, right? You're going to leave your family, you're going to leave everybody behind. So at least you're weighing your decision. But when somebody just got here, right, and they've been here 10 years, 15 years, and they've decided to stay the whole time, and they're saying that the country's terrible. Well, did you know that when you came? When did you figure that out? And why haven't you left? But if it's so bad.
I'll tell you something, Zach. People leave the place of their birth every day, all the time, and they strive to leave the place. There are people
to come here.
Well, to come here and to Europe.
Yep.
They,
Yeah.
And we're far more.
They do that for a reason.
Yeah, and we're far more welcoming than other places. Of course, nothing's perfect.
In my opinion, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with culture, and the culture brings forth prosperity. Because like you showed that video of that Stoic guy who was talking about Africa during the time of colonization, and like why he asked some questions like why didn't they fight harder, and I thought that those were not the greatest questions. I thought it just led me to think, okay, well, everybody throughout all of history up until the nation states, not very long ago, in terms of like the grand scheme of history, they were always saying, let me take everything I can from everybody else and screw them. I want it all, right? Everybody was doing that. And then the question becomes, well, why did the European population win? And it wasn't all the European population either. It was a certain subset of the quote unquote white European population. And it has to do with Enlightenment culture, the ability of the Greeks' logic, all of those things that started in Greece and add to that Judeo-Christian values that allowed for freedom of thought without the idea that if I question the status quo, I'm going to be ostracized, right? And everywhere else in the world, if you said that the sun didn't rise because of Ra, in some cases they killed you, right? So all the people who were like, maybe it's not Ra, they all got killed off. And when you stop doing that and people are allowed to question, they're allowed to find maybe better answers to those questions. And then I thought, wait a minute, that's exactly what the left is doing right now. They're saying, if you disagree with the nation of the world, we're going to ostracize you. We're going to bully you. We're going to beat you. We're going to kill you. We're going to send Antifa, right?
Hey, Joe,
and they're creating that same culture.
Hey, Joe, can you show that? I put that video, by the way, in the top of our feed. I don't know if it plays or not. But if you can play that, Joe.
What feed?
I mean, on the top of our chat board of our in our StreamYard. Yeah.
You're gonna have to send that to me.
Oh.
I can't play it from here.
Oh.
If you send it to my whatever Discord.
All right, I'll send it to your Discord.
Is that that same video?
Yeah, that was that same video. And
yeah, and so the left and the Black Lives Matter movement, if you question the orthodoxy, they ostracize you the same way. they're saying the sun rises because of Ra, and anytime you question that, you're a heretic. And it's creating that same culture where freedom of thought is not encouraged, and that's very alarming to me.
All right, Joe, I just sent you that video of Mike Norton, and if you want to play that, and then we could get into that again, because you said a lot there. So Joe is just
Fixing it up.
Fixing it up to play. Yeah, it does. I'm not hearing it.
He needs to turn his mic on.
Our African ancestors simply have not done enough to earn the kind of international respect that we might have had in an alternate universe scenario in comparison to other phenotypes. When you mentally come to terms with that, you'll realize that it's not any one word that anyone could call you or action that they could take against you that would hurt you so, but your inability to escape what you know deep down to be the deficit, the historical deficit of a people who failed you. Because there's always a loser in war in all of its varying types. It's not any name that anyone could call you. It's the feeling of entrapment. It's the start of a video game in which you could not choose your character, and you can't change your character to another that you may covet. Was it really that Europeans were so historically bad in comparison to everyone else? Or is it that our African ancestors simply didn't fight hard enough for us? In some scenarios, was it that they even wanted us anymore in the first place, our bloodlines? Is it really true that Europeans are inferior? If so, then how could someone so inferior have so thoroughly tricked what are supposed to be gods? It's too easy to blame whites for everything, and they allow it in a way that prevents us from looking forward and inward and truly growing as a people. Unlike the so-called race abolitionists and pro-blacks like to think, if our African ancestors were truly then, like Epicurus, I ask you, were our African ancestors willing to prevent evil but not able? Then they were not as powerful as our fragile egos like to think they were. Were they able but not willing? Then that would make them malevolent. Were they both able and willing? Then why were we enslaved? Were they neither able nor willing? Then why think of them as gods in the first place? Let them go and become something new. You're going to be tempted to follow the fervor of enraged crowds that are still attached to something that no longer actually exists, rationalizing their taking away of other people's right to speak and think. Don't. So long as you're in the act of writing a better future, the past does not have to have the same psychological hold on you that it otherwise would have. Instead, what you can hold on to is what you know you're doing right in a way that makes the past not genuinely apply to you. And in the act of doing so, you can earn genuine respect in a free world instead of destroying human freedom to make yourself feel better. Because respect that isn't earned isn't respect at all. Do not follow where most blacks are going and play into what they're doing. Their mischanneled rage gives rise to their perpetual downfall. Don't be so easily gullible and trollable into tearing down the civilization that gives you the freedom to speak your mind in the first place. They don't realize how they tear down their own freedom simultaneously, as well as their own identity in the process. Your emotions are fuel. Emotions may drive you, but that does not mean that you have to let them steer you.
All right. All right.
Yeah, so I had a thought while that was playing related to another Facebook conversation, but quite a short one actually, where somebody posted a meme showing Candace Owens and some other guy. He was, I don't know who he is, but it said, hey, white people, if you show or talk about the points of these, quote, internalized racists to support your views, we see you, we know what you're doing. And I say, wait a minute, hold on. First of all, if you call somebody racist without evidence, you're the bigot. And so he's a good friend of mine. So I cut off the conversation pretty quickly to maintain our relationship. You know, our families are really close. But he basically, first paragraph, he just starts talking about white splaining. Second paragraph, he says, you're white, so you're not welcome in this conversation. And I was like, okay, let's just not talk about this. But it made me think right now, there's this conflation of ideology and race where in order to be truly black, according to some people, you have to agree to certain viewpoints. And if you disagree with those viewpoints, you are somehow not black anymore. You're illegitimate. And those people are kind of disowned by the leftists who say that black is a certain set of ideas. And here's the problem. When you say those ideas have flaws in them, they say you're attacking my race because they identify their race with these ideas. And they say, therefore, because you don't agree with my ideas, which are my race, that's my blackness, you are a racist.
Well, I mean, and the one thing because he said about respect, and someone just told me something today that I found kind of profound, and I think I believe it. He said respect is important, and he says, I give respect. Respect is given on sight. It's your disrespect that you earn from me. But I give you respect, and I expect that in return. Groups like BLM and other far leftist groups do not give respect on sight. You know, you're disrespected. You know, like your views and your and the way you look is disrespected on sight. And this group has been given unquestioned authority by the establishment. And there are, I've tried to debate with people like it's almost like they're so self-righteous they don't understand you can't be self-righteous and objective. And Western countries are not emotional. They're not emotional countries. They kind of keep that kind of thing in check, and they examine the facts to the fullest extent. And it seems like we've given way to some very juvenile types of behavior.
Yeah, it's kind of like shamanism. Like you said, it's going back to a kind of a not primitive, like a more emotional root, right?
Yeah.
And it's an idea, but it's based on a feeling. And so, for instance, I had a guy recently. He told me, okay, 1 in 10 deaths in the United States by firearm are at the hands of police. Among black people, it's 1 in 15 for the normal population. Among black people, it's 1 in 10. Mm-hmm. And he used that as a statistic to talk about systemic racism. And I said, okay, well, that's good. But why don't we examine that in light of the fact that 50% of murders are committed by black people and 68% of burglaries, despite the fact that they're a disproportionately small percentage of the population? And how does that affect how many police interactions they're going to have? And I've said this to a few people, and they just pretty much ignore that statistic because I think, like you said, it's more of a denial of reason in terms of I have a thing that I'm going to prove, and I'm going to run out there and get all the things that prove that to me, and then I'm going to ignore everything else. Anything that questions that in any way, I'm just not going to answer it. And the thing is, they didn't try to rebut that claim. They didn't try to say anything about those statistics, like, oh, well, that says this or this says this. They just flat out ignored it. And if they said anything, it was about other things that I was talking about. I haven't had a single person engage me on that point.
There's a lot of the truth is this. I have never been more gaslit in my entire life than I have been on the Black Lives Matter issue. And like as far as the civil rights movement goes, I feel like I've been more like disinformed and gaslit. And by the mainstream, the mainstream media is the worst. I mean, the way they phrase things and the way they do things. And it's like, I can't believe that Americans, who are, like Americans and Europeans who are supposed to be like, like somewhat, thoughtful, and we're in the information age, although within the information age, they've taken away the ability to, really speak, because this whole machine learning fairness, the internet has been completely censored, and the mainstream media has, the mainstream media has always been kind of, liberal when it's come to civil rights and stuff, but it's just like off the rails with its coverage, and it's like you can't. And I wonder if these people are told, like a lot of these liberals who believe this stuff are told, hey, don't talk to conservatives about this issue. It's not an open conversation. If they don't agree with you, just shut them down. Because that's what I'm getting from a lot of the.
It's almost like they've been trained to, like they've been trained like cult, like if you don't agree with the groupthink, then ostracize them, cut off content. Don't with the if they don't agree with the orthodoxy, then shun them from the conversation. And you were talking about gaslighting. Like recently, the day the good economic numbers came out, right? Like 2 million jobs gained in the last month.
Yeah.
There was this quote where it said, Donald Trump said that George Floyd would love our economic numbers, and it was a great day for him. And I was like, man, if that was what he said, that's like way off base. That's not good. But I just moved past it because I was like, it's probably not true. And then a few days later, I saw a clip from Fox News that went back and showed the whole clip. And Trump did not mention the economy a single time. He said, we need justice for George Floyd. We need change. We need this. We need that. George Floyd would be looking down right now, and he would be smiling because this is a good day because we're getting justice. And that's gaslighting, exactly like you said. There is no motivation to post that kind of out of context speech except to say that reality is different than it really is. And they hold to the narrative just like a pro gaslighter. They will not back down.
And the thing of it is, the way we come about them, a lot of these gaslighters, is you try to be diplomatic with them and take them at face value, but they will lie. They will lie up and down. They will absolutely. They will make statements of fact that are completely untrue.
Yep. Hands up, don't shoot.
Hands up, don't you? I mean, Mike Brown. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that was the thing, like when Black Lives Matter first came on my radar.
Black Lives Matter started when it began with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin.
Okay.
In that case, I mean, I know people and I know some of the ways Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman has behaved afterwards. Like, I've heard maybe signing Skittles and Confederate flags. That's not a good thing. But the whole case, from my understanding, is based on an untrue and lying. Like his, I forget his girlfriend or whatever, the person who testified. she never wrote that letter. The whole thing seems to be a complete fabrication, and it's like this is what's out there, as well as the what do you call it, the Central Park Five. There's been a lot of information that's out there about those gentlemen that they may not have been as innocent as they seem. There is a lot of stuff out there that they look rather guilty. Not only did they confess, but I mean, there was also an incident. You know, they were initially picked up, from my understand, from the beating of a bicyclist that they just beat the living daylights out before the rape even happened, and they were charged. I think it goes that they were charged with sexual assault, not rape, because they didn't penetrate her, but they did, you know.
But I don't know too much about the Central Park Five because, like you said, I've only heard the mainstream narrative on that one, and I've done very little research. But in terms of Trayvon Martin, was the guy, his last name Brown?
George Zimmerman. Brown. Michael Brown.
Michael Brown, and then several other ones. I've been following one of my friends. He posts Black Lives Matter stuff on Facebook, and every time, I mean, it shocks me to my core. I go, okay, I need to look at this because I don't think that there's a problem with systemic racism. But if I'm wrong, I need to know about this. So let me check this out. And I go in and I look at it, and in every single case, the narrative does not match up with the facts of the matter. Whether or not the facts prove or disprove any type of theory, they have a narrative, and then there are the facts. There was even one time they talked about this guy who was shot in the street, and the article showed him on his knees with his hands behind his head, and an officer had a gun pointing to his back. And I go, man, this is terrible. So I go in and I look at the video, and I forget where it happened. It was like Tennessee or something. And there was a white truck. And what happens is you got three officers kind of flanking him, and he stands up when I'm watching the video, and he slowly walks to his truck. And the officers are following them the whole way. And I it's helicopter view. I'm assuming they're saying, don't do this, right? And he gets all the way to his truck, and he reaches into the window, and that's when they shot him. Now, I can say maybe they should have used a taser. Maybe they should have, right? But I can't say that he was doing something that wasn't dangerous to his own life. Because if a police officer thinks that their life is in danger, they have every right to do everything possible to take care of that situation. And maybe they could use better training on tasering and things like that. But that's not a racist incident. Even if you can say, maybe there's something else that can be done here. And the thing is, the narrative says he's on the kneeling on the street with his hands behind his head. The narrative says Michael Brown had his hands up. And if you try to question somebody on the narrative, you're a racist.
Well, I mean, and the thing of it is, there are plenty of people who've gone to exercises, shoot, don't shoot, including, I forget his name, but he's in Houston, Texas. I forget his name, but he was part of the Nation of Islam, and then he became part of the new Black Panther Party. Quanell X, I believe his name. And it was like, it's not as easy as it looks. It's, there are certain things and standards that look one way, but when you actually go through the whole scenario.
So he went through like a police training exercise where he's trying to make life and death decisions on the fly. And he's like, oh, I guess that job's pretty tough.
Yeah. And everything is, like I said, I mean, everything looks easy from afar, and people are just, the thing of it is, people are deserving of a fair trial.
Yeah.
We're not, this is not a, and also when you go to court, you're not going to a court of justice, you're going to a court of law. And if there's something wrong, if the trial is wrong and they are able to get, break through with the law, you need to change the law because
Yeah.
it may be unjust. The law itself may be unjust, but they're going by the law.
Yeah, and I
Joe,
have a lot of problems with the legal system. That being said, I don't want the law changed after somebody commits a crime or what you would say to be a crime now, and then applying that law back to where they were, because I would never want that done for me either.
and this is really a knee-jerk. These are knee-jerk reactions, much of it based on hysteria, and this is not a discussion. These are just people chanting slogans. By the way, Joe, I sent a video back in Discord. It just says Leo on it. It's of Leo Muhammad. He's part of the Nation of Islam in Britain. And if you could play that would be great. Just I wanted to get a thing of.
Is this the shoot, don't shoot?
No, this is Leo Muhammad. And we can't hear anything.
Turn your mic on, Leo.
Answer is
okay.
That as a people, black people in particular found in the Western Hemisphere, we went through 400 years of slavery at the hands of Caucasian people. As a result of the 400 years of slavery, we lost our names, our language, our culture, our God. For the last 400 years, 100 years in particular, after so-called emancipation or the end of slavery, we have been appealing to white people for freedom, justice, and equality. We have not achieved it yet. We have been asking white people to give us freedom, justice, and equality, and to end racist practices against our people. We have not received it yet. So what we determined from the coming of Master Farad Muhammad, that rather than appeal to white people or any other people to do for us what we must do for ourselves, we determined that we would do it for ourselves, which means now that we will build our own institutions. We will build our own schools. We will build our own manufacturing industries, factories, etc. We will do for ourselves, and in that capacity, we will have meetings, spiritual meetings and gatherings, which are specifically for the resurrection or the raising of our own people without participation or interference from anybody else. Based on our history, every time we have allowed you to come in and partake in our what we call family gatherings or meetings, you have usurped, disrupted, or otherwise redirected or destroyed that movement. So based on learning from history, we have determined today that the Nation of Islam, following the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, will build for ourselves without the internal help of Caucasian people. That is the reason why we don't allow you to come into those types of meetings. Yes, they can. What about Europe? Because we see the Arabs as black people. We see the Arabs, let me tell you, we see the Arabs, we see the Asians, we see the Chinese, we see the yellow, the brown, and we see us as one family. The only one who has put himself outside of the family. Not that we put you out, you put yourself out by your behavior toward the darker peoples of the earth. You put yourself out. Look, go to your dictionary. You cannot find the term yellow supremacy, brown supremacy, black supremacy.
Can you stop it, Joe? All right.
That's an interesting take.
It is.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like the word white supremacy, because it's really a tool for leftists to marginalize white people.
Yeah, because if you say black power, yellow power, purple power, it's all good until you say white power. And I actually agree that white supremacy is wrong. I don't believe
in it today. It has to be codified by law, and there's
No, yeah, exactly. People who are white supremacists are evil. but I don't agree that it's a systemic problem. Like, and people who are racist, not only are they morally evil, if you want to justify it that way, in any sense, they're foolish. It's just a foolish idea. But to say that it's codified in law, then once you're in that situation, then yes, then you have a systemic problem. But I thought, real quick, and I'll let you jump back in, that it was interesting that he said we're going to do things for ourselves. And if you look at one population that has been consistently mistreated in almost every place that they've existed throughout history, is the Jewish people, right? And that's exactly what they did. They just formed small communities where they helped each other out, and they had lending with very little to no interest between the different families. They helped each other by building that strong community. They almost always ended up affluent in their community, and then of course they were a lot of times driven out of that country because they became affluent because they helped each other. So if he really believes that that's the truth, that they're being systemically oppressed, it's a good reaction. I just don't agree with his premise.
Well, I mean, and I almost wanted to make the point. I've asked this before. Would a person of any race, other than one that's, and I don't know if this kind of talk is in Germany or if it's in Holland. It seems like anywhere the Anglosphere is, you're going to see this kind of talk.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike, and I go back to Japan. Would somebody of non-Japanese heritage, like anywhere, would somebody of non-Japanese heritage be able to do what this person from the Nation of Islam is doing?
That's very true. Like, would he be able to stand up on the street? Actually, I had somebody ask a question very similar to that today. The guy who was talking about, well, I was in the go back to your country argument, and somebody popped in and said, well, would you, if you were in China and somebody came up to you and said, go back to your country, would you consider that racist? And I said, well, it depends. If I'm standing on the street corner shouting anti-China messaging, and let's assume the Communist Party doesn't arrest me, but let's say I'm doing that and I'm saying I hate China, it's the worst country in the world, and some Chinese person who loves their country walks up to me and says, well, then get out of my country. Well, then that's one thing. But if he just walks up to me and says, go back to your country, by way, which is my friend in high school taught me that means white ghost. It's the racist white term in Chinese. Then yeah, that would be racist, right? Mm-hmm. So it's entirely different.
Yeah, and like I said, it seems like it's only in Western countries where this kind of thing, and I could be wrong. It seems
it's
like
expected it's only, to be tolerated.
Yeah, I mean we're tolerated of people who just badmouth us and get on street corners, and this is wherever we go, and we're like, and the thing of it is, I've been mentioning about the EDL. If the EDL goes on Speaker's Corner in London, they get mobbed, and now they'll be even more mobbed.
What's Speaker's Corner?
Speaker's Corner in London is like where people just go up, and it's a free speech zone.
Okay.
From my understanding, but
they get shouted down and
the like. And I know that they were, before they were in the EU, they were part of European hate speech laws. I'm hoping they changed it. They Brexit has happened and they're out of the EU. So I'm wondering if there will be a difference in like, hey, freedom of speech, which is important to any Western democracy. We're seeing that being killed in America, by the way, by the powers that be. The internet, YouTube was built as an open forum, and they're acting as publishers by they're only putting out mainstream, like they're pushing mainstream content, and they've begun censoring things, and it's under European hate speech laws.
Really?
I remember, yeah, and I remember because I got someone
in the
on
US.
someone on Twitter, by the way, called me out for hate speech, and they said under German hate speech laws, it's what I said was not hateful, and it wasn't under British anymore or European. It was I don't know why they said German, but I guess that's kind of part of the EU kind of thing.
So you got cleared from Germany to say what you want to say?
Yeah. Angela Merkel.
Angela Merkel put her. She got the stamp. She brought it out.
Merkel gave me one of these. Yeah, you're okay. It's like, but I mean,
yeah, you can do what you want. Yeah,
it's fine. Oh yeah, not hateful. Those not hateful. You gotta. But it's like this guy's allowed to completely say that whites aren't allowed in the meetings, and nothing happens to him. But if someone like Tommy Robinson and talks about the rapes in Europe, I mean in England and in Rotherham, over 1,400 girls supposedly have been raped, and like nothing is said. And to me, these groups are talking about a thing that happened in the United States.
Right. I find it weird that they're protesting that across the entire world because, like, what do they know about it?
Yeah, and also what do we know about it? I mean, like, and how, like, we can't. The thing is, we can't even examine any facts. This is all emotion.
Right.
And they
I would agree. Even though I say that the officers involved, I think they should be charged. I think they should be tried. I think they're guilty, but I think that they should get their fair shot in court. And from what I've seen of the video, it's fairly obvious what's going on there, and the fact that that officer put that man's life in danger, and the other officers allowed it to happen. And so when you have evidence like that, everybody gets together and says, that was an atrocity. Let's stop that. And then they say, yeah, Black Lives Matter. Let's do this movement because we need to fight back because Black lives don't matter. Well, if they didn't matter, why would everybody be like George Floyd is an atrocity and those people should go to jail? Like, nobody disagrees with that.
Because it's based on hysteria. It's not based on logic and reason.
Right.
And the thing is, a lot of these groups, like particularly the ADL, did Joe just leave?
I don't know.
Yeah. Particularly the ADL started because, I don't know if you know about, there was a lynching of a Jewish man in the 1900s, and there was a lynching of a Jewish man in the 1900s, and he, and the ADL was formed. Leo Frank was lynched by a group of vigilantes, and I believe in Atlanta or like in Georgia, and the ADL was formed because of that.
That was the Anti-Defamation League?
The Anti-Defamation League.
Okay. I thought you were saying the EDL
for
a while because you were talking about, the ADL. Okay.
And now the ADL is going, and now it seems like the ADL, the thing that they were against, which was fanaticism and lynch mob mentality, seems to be what they're supporting now.
It's infected them entirely. Yeah, I agree with that. It's the group thing, walking in lockstep. Let's burn the heretics. And it's interesting because like you were talking about that the guy from the Nation of Islam, the Muhammad, what was his name? But anyway, the guy who was just speaking, in my opinion, I think if he wants to form a group of people that is only him and his buddies, whatever they are, if it's all Nation of Islam and they don't want anybody else in there, they want to build a community, they should be able to do that. I think that's what freedom is, freedom of association. And I think it's the thing that you were talking about, and that that I think is the biggest point is that it doesn't extend in the opposite direction. Like, I don't agree with racism, but I think that somebody should be free to be racist. Because if you're not free to be racist, then you can't be free to say ideas that might be racist, might be not, and then somebody else say an idea that counteracts that, and nobody can learn anything because we're not allowed to think if we can't speak. We can't, like you and I, we can't have a conversation and I say something and you go, whoa, hold on a second. You know, you need to be corrected on this. And then you say something. I go, hey, whoa, what about this? How are we going to learn if we can't have a conversation? And that's exactly what these leftist groups are trying to shut down. And they use, like you said, they use those terms like white supremacy in order to make it look like and support the ideology that only white people are racist, that only white people hurt only people of color, and that it doesn't go the opposite direction, that there's no potential for a black person, for instance, to be racist. And to me, that's a racist sentiment. If you're going to say that only white people can be a certain way, you're being racist by definition. And then that goes back to the whole gaslighting thing. You know, I don't know if they're gaslighting themselves or they know what they're doing. I think a few of them know what they're doing. I think most of them are gaslit, you know, and they're just caught up in this mentality where everything's been explained to them and they're going to go to their gurus. And if you contradict the guru, then you must be shunned. And there's no place for open discussion or thought. It's just not there.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, what's sad to me is that the establishment is kind of behind this, and the left gets away with things that the right could never get away with. You know?
Yeah, it's like from the top down and the bottom up. You know, the people at the top, they encourage other people to deny speech, and then when those people deny speech, then the people at the top like support them and allow it. Just like the nation of Chads, you know. If there were ever a Second Amendment nation, it never happened. It would be the worst thing in the world. Could never make a nation based on, you know, we respect the Second Amendment. The police need to back off and let us have our Second Amendment. No, it would never happen. But when it's the nation of Chaz, it's a big deal. We should do that.
Yeah, I mean, and you're talking about the Seattle, the place in Seattle. Yeah, and I mean, these outrage mobs seem to have absolute control over the economy, and they can literally blacklist you and keep you from working. I mean, Tucker Carlson has had a lot of his advertisers have been pulled from Fox News as long as he's on, and it's like,
is it the Anti-Defamation League who does that? Let's call people and we'll get these boycotts organized. There's a lot of leftist groups that do that. They'll be like, we don't agree with what this guy says, so we're going to go and boycott everybody who advertises on his show.
You know what? The main group, from my understanding, I mean, there are a few groups that do that. I mean, and they're just several, I think, splinter groups. But
yeah,
a group called the Color of Change, that is,
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, no, you have. Well, yeah, I mean, but they are really active in censoring people, and they have, you know, and then there are plenty of other like civil rights groups that are very active in censoring. And the thing is, Tucker Carlson is not like he's not even a, you know, he's not a Rush Limbaugh. He's a, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard him speak before.
No, he's got a lot of moderate positions, especially when it comes to like government intervention in the economy. I don't know. I haven't watched his show a ton, but I do know some of his stuff, and he's more on the right-leaning moderate side, I would think. Even you go to Sean Hannity, you're going farther right. Then you go Rush Limbaugh, then you go Ben Shapiro. You know, and he's kind of farther closer to the middle than any of them.
Yeah, but I think it's because he is effective, at what he says.
He really is.
And he's taken on the cultural left, I think, fairly effectively. And
I've seen he has a lot of people on his show that he disagrees with, and I really like that. He'll just bring on, like, here's uber leftist vegan professor, Jay Torre talking about how women should own the world. Just has conversations with them, and I think it's fantastic.
He had Blair Imani on. She is a queer.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, she's a queer Muslim activist, and
that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, she actually converted to Islam. She's black, and she's light-skinned black. I think her mother is mixed, but she came to fame, and like I said, to me, people kind of like chewed her out because like you can't be in Islam. I mean, I really don't like. I mean, for a long time, you couldn't necessarily be a Christian and be a queer person or a homosexual. I mean, and there are a lot of people who believe, within the Bible.
Well, and I'm one of the people who thinks homosexuality is a sin, but that doesn't affect how I talk to or interact with homosexual people, gay people. It's a matter of what you believe about things. And the thing that I think is a little bit different when you're talking about a gay Muslim is when you get to the conversation of what they do to gay people in Iran.
Yeah, and gay people in a lot of, just about every Islamic country, I believe they are persecuted in some way. In just about every Islamic nation, there's heavy persecution. Now, Blair tried to say that it was because of Western influence of Islam that this happened. That before Westerners came in contact with Islam, that it was fairly open-minded to homosexuality and the like. And there is a lot of grooming going on of young boys in Islam. Particularly, I've heard in Afghanistan, but I don't know how true that before Western culture came around, that Islam was tolerant of homosexuality. I just don't necessarily really buy into that. I think it's more,
yeah, I don't either.
And I think she gets her ego.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of a narrative.
Yeah, I think the reason she became, Islamic, she probably read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I think she became Islamic more of an ego thing and a form of protest than an actual religion that she supports. And I think with her, she's doing things, she's making arguments that kind of, fulfill her ego than fulfill the reality of the situation. Now, Zach, have you traveled to any other countries besides America? Or are you basically American?
I never have. I've been to Mexico and Canada. I've been to Mexico for a few days, and then one time for my brother's wedding. I really wish I had traveled more. I got sick with chronic fatigue about 12, 13, 14 years ago, right before I got married. And so I guess that would make it 12, like about 4 years ago. And before that, I was 27, so I could have done some traveling before then. And I just never got around to it. But I'd love to go to China. That would be like my first place to go. If my wife wants to go to Europe, I want to go to China. I just love it. I took Chinese in college. I actually passed one semester. So I think it was the only class I passed that semester. So I didn't do very well in college, but I loved Chinese. Such a beautiful language.
And did you study much like Chinese history and Chinese, culture and stuff?
No, they didn't go much into it. Around that time I read the Tao Te Ching, and I I did some study on my own, but I would not consider myself in any subject to be any type of expert at all. So anytime we're talking about history, I'm going to defer to you and be like, I think this happened, and people just correct me because I should be corrected. Hey, Joe, you're back.
He just had a little dealing. By the way, Joe, so you've been to South Korea, and could you go to South Korea and just bash on the South Korean people and tell them how terrible they were? Could you go and do that there?
No. I mean, you're talking about Asian countries, and they all have the same strong cultural identities. They're very, very strong as far as they know where they're from, and basically echoing everything that Zach said about Japan, and Japan, China, and most Asian countries have that. They're multi-generational homes. So it's not uncommon to see a grandmother, parents, and children all living under one roof. No, that's
or India.
Yeah.
But what you do see there is that there is a lot of blatant racism, but I'm talking about my experience about 20 years ago, a little less, and probably I'm gonna guess things have changed. I know they stopped eating dogs in Korea, so they make changes. But
things do progress.
And you know what? You know what? The one thing that's kind of sad is, when I was a kid, I had a few, the few Korean friends that I had, their parents were completely like, they hated the Japanese.
Well, they have that a little bit of that conflict going on. They have that in their own culture too. People dress a certain way they don't like, then they get it that way. But the Japanese were very arrogant, and I think that a lot of Koreans may feel kind of that they're considered almost mutts. They're not quite Chinese. They're not quite Japanese, which is great. That makes them South Korean. But what you get was that kind of almost, it sounded like, maybe they were a little bit jealous. There was a little bit of Japanese envy going on, but the Japanese culture, unfortunately, doesn't have the reproductive rates to maintain its society. I don't think they're going to be around for a whole lot longer.
Well, what I've been told is this: Japan is the most automated nation in the world, and and any foreign, and they'll get foreign workers, but after they're done with their work, they have to leave. And for the most part, they want to be self-sufficient, and the reason they're becoming as automated as they are is they don't want outsiders. They want to be able to, have Robbie the robot just cook their meals and whatnot. And maybe if they need a doctor or something like that, they'll get one from India or somewhere else. But for the most part, they're automated because they do not want outsiders. That's what I.
And one of the things about that is, I mean, I can't speak to the sentiments of the people of another nation, but for my part, I view that as a cultural pride, not so much a racial pride. Like I agree, maybe Koreans hate Japanese people, but I don't think that's because they're different races. I think it's because their nations had some conflict, and that boils over. They're like, we're at war. It's just like how nobody likes Dallas Cowboys fans, right? Well, I mean, it's the same thing, except on a national level.
And the one thing I started to notice was with the Korean and Japanese, that kind of thing was kind of fading. And now we have this, everybody hates white people or people of European descent. It's just okay to hate us. And how long until there's some pushback? And now the establishment seems to be okay with calling us the oppressor. We're being, it feels to a degree like wherever we go, we're cast as the movie of this old villain. Like we're still the villain of the movie. And it's like, wait a minute. This isn't the
it's
to
hilarious.
the 1950s or the 1960s or 70s. This is now. And it's like
I know.
It's almost like we have to be, bending over backwards. And like I said, I mean, you see what we're seeing in Europe right now. It's like, even in England, I mean, a lot of these people, their parents came by choice.
It's funny that I was called the oppressor one time, and it stuck with me. And then ever since then, it's kind of like anytime I'm in one of those conversations where people are saying you have white privilege or you should be talking because you're white, you have no place in this conversation. It's funny to me if it weren't a tragedy. I'm like, okay, hold on a second. If I were the oppressor, I could like walk into this conversation and do whatever I want, right? Because I'm the oppressor. But you're not really treating me like the oppressor here. If I were the oppressor, I'd be oppressing. But it seems like it's the other way around.
Yeah, because, and by the way, no one would say, you're not white, you have no place in this conversation. They'd be shut down immediately. The establishment would say, hey, you can't.
Yeah, there's no place for that.
Yeah, you can't get away with saying, you're not white. You're not of European heritage. You have no place in this conversation. This is for European Gentiles only. You have no place in it. Hey, you'd be shut down immediately.
Yeah, you could go, like you said, to South Korea and you ask, is your nation great? And they would say yes. You go to Japan and you say, is your nation great? They would say yes. You go to China, is your nation great? And they'd look around to make sure the Communist Party wasn't looking at them, and they'd say, well, maybe not. But but the point is, there's no other place where it would be wrong for them to say, I am proud to be South Korean. And it's not wrong to say, I'm proud to be Indian. I'm proud to be Afghanistanian, right? Despite the fact that my nation, like every other nation, has flaws, has difficulties, has problems. I am proud to live in the United States of America, and I am proud. And I would say I'm grateful that I was, like you said last time we had a conversation, like I was born here. I didn't do anything about that, but I'm just lucky to be born in the freest, most prosperous nation in the entire history of the world, despite the fact that people are trying to tear it down. Our economy's rebounding. It's weird. It's like you can't beat it. And the point comes back to freedom, and that's exactly what's trying to be destroyed. And as soon as it is, we lose everything about what makes us who we are.
Well, our freedom of speech right now is really being curtailed, because if you can punish someone for and really punish them, and there's no act of contrition, like like this group is judge, jury, and executioner, and basically a lot of this cancel culture group, they can destroy your career and you're never coming back.
Right.
They make it clear, like, hey, you've got the mark of Cain on you, and you will forever walk the wilderness, and you will never be forgiven. And if we find dirt on you of a couple of years ago, like they're doing of Howard Stern right now, you can be absolutely finished in this society. And it's like, who elected these people? I mean, and this is like I said, there's no trial with cancel culture. It's all like the powers that be have decided you're canceled, and nobody gets a say in it. No shareholders, no open meetings, no nothing. You're done for. And it's just like these rules on the internet, like Twitter and Facebook. There's no open community. It's no transparency with this. Almost, it's like, what's going on here? Why are you doing what you're doing? It's almost like it's a secret. It's almost like it's a secret police that has decided to punish you.
Yeah, only it's community organized.
It's community organized, but who don't answer to anyone else.
No, they don't. And the thing is, I think we and by we I mean maybe the last generation, but I mean I've been complicit in it as well. We sit there and we watch Netflix and we go, I know that they've taken over for 30 years, 40, 50 years in Hollywood, and we let it happen. And then they take over the institutions of education, higher education, and we let it happen. And now it's not just they come for your job at Google or Twitter or Facebook. People lose their jobs at well, maybe not Joe's. I was thinking Joe's Auto Shop, right? But there's just random jobs that people have around the nation, and they haven't even said anything like terribly, maybe controversial, but only controversial because of where we are today. And then they lose their job over it. Their docs, their entire life is ruined, and it happens in an hour.
Well, Zach, I'll tell you something. This goes to the history of the blacklist and the groups that were blacklisted in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. They came back with a passion by the late 1950s and then the 1960s. They started to come back.
Now, the original blacklist, was that for communism, like specifically, or okay?
And then they just they rebranded themselves, and they don't call themselves communists anymore. They just call themselves progressives.
Right.
And they, their children came back into Hollywood. I mean, Sean Penn's father was a blacklisted, I believe, a blacklisted director or actor. And there are plenty of these other guys who were in the film, who were in the studio, like who are in the studio today, who had relatives that were in the black, that were blacklisted, that made a comeback in the 60s and 70s. They had children, and they control the media, and they also control the internet, and they also ended up taking over the college as well. Mm-hmm. Particularly the humanities department and a lot of their the HR departments and stuff like that. So they are closely behind a lot of this cancel culture stuff, and they really metastasize themselves in just about every large industry. And they've particularly in the media, whether it's the film industry, the television, the media industry, the film and television, and forget about the plays; they're all lefties. But I mean, and now the internet.
Yeah, they're coming for the internet.
Well, the internet was a place where hey, conservatives had a voice, and they were speaking out against this institutional racism, systemic racism, and the like, and they were like getting a lot of shares. I mean, Stefan Molyneux talked about white guilt. I mean, you had other far rightists like Jared Taylor and stuff, but I mean, there was a dialogue there. Mm-hmm. And like, wait a minute, there was holding, like trying to get the civil rights movement, some of these civil rights movements to hold up, like, hey, is what you say to be true, and hold it up to its bootstraps. Yeah, like they wanted to do in the past. I mean, in the 1950s, when they tried to, get out there and liberals tried to make civil rights an issue, they completely ignored them. I mean, I know, for example, Rod Serling, who did The Twilight Zone, he wanted to do a dramatization of the Emmett Till killing. In no way in hell could he do that. But today, if you try to get the opposite done and have any empathy towards us. I mean, if you tried to talk, if they tried to do a dramatization of these Muslim grooming gangs in Britain, you couldn't get it made.
It's Islamophobia. And going to your point about censorship in Twitter and Facebook, YouTube, all of that, which I think Facebook is at least publicly more open than any of the other platforms, which I think is good. But despite the fact that it was bad timing, I really like the fact that Trump and the Trump administration is thinking about taking these types of corporations on, because I don't have any problem with YouTube censoring whatever they want because they're a private corporation. But if they do, and they say, we allow this viewpoint and not this viewpoint, then there are protections under the law that they currently enjoy that they should not enjoy anymore. Because if they only support a certain type of viewpoint, then they become responsible for the viewpoints that are expressed.
Well, they're
But if
advertised.
yeah,
They're advertised as an open platform, and they have 230 protection. I think it's Section 230 protection.
exactly. And I think they should be moved to publisher status if they're going to be a publisher. And I think that Trump is doing a good thing, employing the FCC and looking into that.
Because this is clearly, I mean, they are clearly acting as a publisher.
Yeah.
And it's like,
I think Facebook was moving in that direction, and then they kind of pulled back a little bit.
But they also, they have a lot of, all of the social media companies, Zach, have these kind of hate speech laws that are really arbitrary, and they don't, the dialogue, like what you can and cannot say and what you can and cannot do, which really goes
not well defined,
and which really goes against, the First Amendment. And really, it's unfortunate that the information age has become the censorship age. I mean, how can and the reason we started our company was because of internet censorship. How can you have, to gain merit, something has to have transparency. You have to know all the ins and outs of an argument. And
on that note, I have got to step out early. Brian, you can end this podcast when you're done. Zach, sorry about that. My phone's just I got to deal with some stuff. So
all right, good to see you, Joe.
Likewise, guys. I'll be around.
So we'll go over just a little bit more of it, and then we'll end it. But I just wanted to say that,
we actually never got to the point of this broadcast, which was the EDL and the difference between that. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to just nail back to the EDL and the BLM, Black Lives Matter, the British. There's the EDL, the English Defense League, and the Black Lives Matter groups that have been clashing, and they are clashing because during their protests, during their protests, and during the Black Lives Matter protests, there have been quite a few British monuments vandalized, and some of them have been downright destroyed. And they wanted to protect that. And the mainstream media made it sound like the EDL started because they wanted to just march against Black Lives Matter, and that's not the truth. And like I said, I mean, this kind of militancy and social justice, it seems like it's all over the West. And it's like, and like I said, it's got the backing of the establishment, and it's got the backing of the establishment here, and it's got the backing of the establishment in Europe. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess there's going to be a fight against the establishment, but a lot of people are really quiet. One of the reasons that people like Trump, Biden has such a large lead over Trump, is a lot of people believe that they're not going to give any honest answers on who they're voting for, or Trump supporters aren't even going to answer a phone call because they don't know. I mean, these people are kind of scary, to be honest with you. And you can't go out in the open and be a Trump supporter, and particularly in blue states.
I totally agree. I see people posting on Facebook all the time about how stupid Trump is, and I don't see anybody posting, I love that Trump did this. I love my president. I think he's doing a good job here. Even just a simple fact of he did something right. And it's telling as to the conversation and the way that people are pressured to stay silent. Because if you have any dislike of conflict, and a lot of people, it really riles them up to to be in conflict. They just want to live a peaceful life, and that's not wrong. But when they're incentivized to stay silent because they're going to be bullied by the masses for anything that's out of lockstep with a certain ideology, well, they choose to stay silent, which is one of the reasons, like, my brother, he won't go on Facebook because he's like, I don't want to be mobbed, and it's not going to do any good. And that's one of the reasons why it like really irks me that so many people are choosing not to say anything publicly about their support for our president because of this mob. And so I go out there and I fight them, and that's my choice too, right? But I
mean, like, what? Because I was doing that for a while as well, but then I thought to myself, what good does it do to fight an angry mob? I mean, do they want to have a discussion like this Black Lives Matter thing? Yeah.
Yeah, so I won't have a discussion. Well, like, I've gone through this entire phases of things. Like, I won't have a discussion with anybody who insults me in any way or is disrespectful. I just end the conversation, or I block them if I have to. I don't mind if they disagree with everything I say, which happens like all the time. And I will have a conversation with somebody who wants to go back and forth, even if they disagree with me all day. And at a certain point, I say, okay, I've achieved my goal in this conversation, and I've learned something, and I hope I've taught something, and let's move on. But one of my goals, and this is not necessarily a goal that everybody should have or that anybody has, it's just something that's important to me, is that when I post something on Facebook, I know that somewhere somebody goes, it's not just me who thinks that. And they feel like they're not alone. And it scares me that there's so many people who value freedom in our country who feel like they have to keep their mouth shut, and they feel like they're alone. And I hate that. And so I don't always engage, but I do sometimes. And I think it's important that people, like, I don't mind conflict as much. If you say something that disagrees with me, like I mentioned, I think that the Bible says that homosexuality is a sin. You disagree with that? Good. Let's talk about it. Right? And I don't mind if it gets heated. I don't mind if you go, well, that's terrible, right? It's going to make me riled up a little bit, but that's a good thing, I think. And so I kind of think that I'm out there sometimes, at least every once in a while, somebody's going to look at it and they're going to say, you know what? Somebody out there thinks the same way I do, and I'm glad that I see that, because I don't feel like I'm the only person who thinks that everything is ridiculous right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I'll tell you something, Zach. I've never seen things so backwards in my lifetime. Where,
yeah,
like, I mean, there was, like, where I have seen something so illogical and just so, like, primarily emotions based has that much power. Like, where they're just bending over backwards for, leftist causes that have no, like, almost like, I mean, Black Lives Matter was proven, like, several of the things, they've been proven to be wrong several times. And
absolutely.
And for this, like, and look, this time they're right, that's fine. But to give them unquestioned power, I've never seen this, and this is like I said, to me, like, America is a nation of, based on ideals. Europe and England, I mean, in Europe, all European countries primarily are based on ethnicity. Those are ethnic nations, and they've been very nice to let people that aren't ethnic, England has been very kind to let people, and have been very, in my opinion, compared to other nations, have been very tolerant of people that aren't the same ethnicity.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you go for any nation in the world, and you're right. There's going to be overall a pretty homogenous people group in terms of genetics or race, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to America, and you had the Spaniards and the French and the English and the, you know, everybody tried to get a piece of America, and then the Americans rebelled, and then they all had to go, okay, how are we going to work together?
Yeah.
And it's been a, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, and there's some, listen, I do believe when America was founded, I'm going to be blunt and honest here, America was founded by an ideal, but it
fell short of that.
It did fall short of that, and it was, in my opinion, founded by Europeans, and it was mainly for Europeans. I mean, the first immigration laws and the like. It's not that way anymore, and it's expanded beyond that.
Yeah.
But its original intent was meant for.
I agree with that. It was for white people, and
Yeah.
they had these ideals that said, we believe that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with their creator, with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, the thing. And and all of a sudden, you know, they got to a point where they said, you know what? We're not in alignment with those principles. And we started out in a place where we were subjugating other men who are created equal. And we had a big fight about that. And then it was called the Civil War. And then even after that, you've got the Jim Crow laws. But then, you know, you get to the 60s and 70s, you get the civil rights laws, and things really started to change even past that. You get, you know, slavery, people get freed, and then you get the civil rights laws. And from that point forward, I'm not going to say the playing field was equal from day one after the civil rights laws, but we have gone way far in terms of equality. And I think that this idea that there's this systemic force that is preventing Black people or
any
Hispanics
or
any other minority.
Yeah, you know, Thomas Sowell has said this, that discrimination does not necessarily correlate into, economic poverty. I mean, some groups, he said something in Malaysia, the Chinese are greatly discriminated against, yet they thrive. And
and for instance, the Jewish people throughout history, they've been discriminated against in almost every nation that they've existed, and they have, for the most part, thrived.
Yeah. And when the Chinese, you know, there was a Chinese Exclusion Act, and the Chinese were only allowed a few jobs in America, and every job they took, they dominated that field, like the laundry, and I believe that, I don't know if it was cooks.
Now they own that. They own that shit, man.
They absolutely own the field of the laundry, and they absolutely, and I think it was also farming, and they were, you know, they had a work ethic, and it's today, you know, here in America. I mean, here in California, Latinos dominate. And I don't know if that was probably the way it was in Houston, but Latinos dominate the construction industry. And a lot of it has to do with, just the, like the endurance level that because I remember when I tried to do construction and to compete, I mean, those guys work donuts around a lot of the native, and a lot of them were not native born, and they can just, I guess because they're crossing these deserts and they're hungry, they'll do things that other people won't do. Like our grandfather. I mean, my grandfather, our grandfather.
Well, there's also like when they're growing up. When you look at when they're growing up, they're working hard from the time that they're 6, 7, 8 years old, harder than we do, physically. And then so they're training, and then they come over here. They've already got the physical acumen that's been built up from years of doing whatever it was they were doing in their country, that they came here to make a better life, and they can do those things. They already know how to do it, and they already have the muscles and the endurance and all of that set up. Yeah, man.
Well, there's
there's
social welfare there. I mean, like you either work and you produce, or you don't. You may not eat. So
Yeah.
There is a kind of hardship, and I find those. I found when I worked amongst them, I found them to be more real than than a lot of other people. Like, I mean, and like some of their kids, they don't act. They get they become SJWs, but that's not found in the the immigrants that are here. They're the backbone. They are like kind of like the way my grandfather was. He said, you work till you drop, and are both my grandparents, they would eat dirt before they accepted any form of public assistance. It was just like, you just don't do that. I mean, it's changed today, but like, I mean, and they were like the most real just real honorable, old-fashioned people that I ever came across were some of the construction workers and some of the laborers from Latin America and from Asian countries like the Philippines or from Korea. Those guys that did that, they were like really the backbone, and just like, hey, and they were just common sense type of people. And I don't this is all these protesters. This is all first world nonsense, in my opinion. Spoiled first world nonsense.
Yeah. I agree. I was going to say that that's one of the reasons why I am, at the same time that I'm for securing the border, like hardcore, let's get that secure. If you're not supposed to be here, like by law, then you're not supposed to be here. And then I'm also for changing the law to be far more accepting of first generation immigrants, because it's like you said, they come here, they're grateful, they work hard, they want to be here. And anybody who has that attitude, that's the thing. It's not the affluence that makes America what it is. The affluence came from the attitude. And the attitude was, we're going to sail across an entire ocean because we have a dream, and we want to set up that dream. And now that we know that there's a place where we can have that dream, we're going to go there. And from that point forward, people have been doing that year after year, day after day, generation after generation. And those people built America. And when we cut off that stream, it's like cut off your own bloodstream. And I think that we need more of people.
I mean, and like I said, I mean, you saw that video with the gumballs about immigration, and like, it's not necessarily as humane as it is, but maybe we do benefit from these.
Right. Even from a selfish perspective, I think that America needs immigrants. We need them. We're not trying to help them. We need that influx of attitude that they have, that pioneer spirit that we lost. That's what we need them.
But do their children have that philosophy? Because a lot of times their children.
But let's say we got wave after wave of immigrants coming here to build a better life, just like you have in Ellis Island.
Yeah. Well, we need to change the education system as well, Zach. I mean,
I agree with that.
When you're taught to be a victim, and it's kind of your ego, you get that. What I'm saying is the victimhood becomes part of the ego, and then you don't have to succeed in other things. You can be a professional victim and professional grievance person.
Right.
Hey,
so even if we had that influx of those immigrants, if we put them through our education system, we're going to get a bunch of pansies coming out the other end, thinking that everything is everybody else's fault.
Yeah. And this is like, this has to be the most fragile, this is the most authoritarian and most fragile generation that I've ever seen that are protesting now. It's like, what are you doing? It's like,
they call themselves victims, and then they beat the crap out of you if you don't agree with them.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're very violent, and they can silence you. How big of a victim are you if you can silence me?
Right. Like, how am I the oppressor at that point?
Yeah. Not much anymore.
I feel like I'm big and powerful. I'm a mean old bully as you beat the crap out of me as I'm lying on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it just kind of baffles me. And it seems like we're hiding behind a lot of degenerate criminals, and we're propping them up as heroes. And I guess the only thing that noble, good people have to do is they have to work hard and just maintain their sanity and eat right and the like, and just be that beacon of light and decency, because nothing can come out of this kind of egocentric behavior. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's healthy. And I think what we need to have is just good people start to stand up, take a stand, and just
But what does that mean though in terms of like you said earlier? No, my question is, like you said earlier, what good is it standing up to the mob, and what is it going to be like for the people who do stand up to this mob, especially if we let it get to an even worse point where it is today? I think there's going to be consequences for that standing up.
I think to a degree. I mean, and I'm a person that doesn't believe in pacifism. I believe you do with conflict. You either one or two things: you fight or you flee. If you can't win the fight, you flee.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do, I think, what should be done perhaps is really maybe non-cooperation. Truck drivers, maybe those, hey, we'll feed ourselves, we'll do ourselves. If they're not going to respect our society and respect the rule of law, I don't think people should rebuild, and I don't think people should work. Maybe there should be an exodus of people who are somewhat conservative and entrepreneurial minded and worker minded to leave. Particularly the laborers and stuff. Like, hey, what are we doing around here if we're not going to be respected? We should maybe just, have a lot of non-cooperation. And then hey, if you want to come back in, or you want to, because you will suffer. I mean, my thing is, they should stop giving this Chaz group any food.
Right. Let them be autonomous. But that comes to an issue that I have with the civil rights laws, because I think the civil rights laws from the 1960s were badly written. I think they should have been purely restrictions on government authority related to race, right? The government shall make no law, right? Just like the First Amendment. The government shall make no law regarding race. And instead, they said, nobody has any right to do anything about race. And so as of right now, you could make a legal argument that if a trucker doesn't want to go to a Black Lives Matter area because they're being disrespected because they're white, that would be somehow unconstitutional. It would be illegal because it is a positive right. Those people have a right to be fed because they're Black. You can't deny them. They're Black. You have to feed them. Whereas if it were a negative right where the government could not do that, anybody who wanted to make their own choices could make their own choices.
And if they're not respected, if they feel, hey, I'm going to be disrespected, regardless of their race, if you say, I don't agree with these individuals' values, and you just decide, hey, I'm not going to cooperate.
Right. And I don't think it's about race. I think it's about values. But I think that there's a legal case to be made in terms of race. You start to look at the wording and you start to say, oh, you're not trucking to places and there's a lot of Black people there. That's about race. Be hard to defend yourself.
I've heard in Minneapolis where they've disbanded the police, truckers are not going to go in there. They're not going to go into a place that doesn't have police protection.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more justification for being able, like, you can distinguish there. You can say, well, my life's in danger. I don't know what's going to happen if there's no police around.
Yeah. But,
it's going to go terribly for Minneapolis, by the way.
Yeah.
We're going to get to see firsthand exactly what they want to do to society, and it's not going to be
driving a truck is rather difficult. And what if they just abandon the big cities and say, hey, now now you've got to come to us.
I think that's that's a place where you could make a stand, you know.
And it's
If
like that,
if I'm not respected for being white, then I'm not respected in any place. I don't know where I was going with that argument. You
no,
go
but like
ahead.
I said, I mean,
Trying to.
they can take basically what they can do is just say, hey, I'm not going to I'm not going to deliver to these cities, these large cities anymore. They're too dangerous.
You don't want me, you can't have me.
Yeah. You want to, because I've been robbed too many times. It's unsafe. There's too much lawlessness. I'm done. And then what? What happens if truckers stop delivering to these large cities? Then it's like, hey, now and what happens if many of the businesses don't rebuild, and many truckers decide, I don't want to go into these cities anymore. I'm being disrespected. They're shutting down the roads. I'm going to go to more, smaller cities and smaller municipalities where there's a respect, and people set up a perimeter in those areas, and they say, hey, we're going to decide, to a degree who comes in and who comes out. I mean, because that's what you're aiming towards. If you have this kind of lawlessness, that's what you're aiming towards, and we're coming closer and closer to a balkanized nation than we ever have before, where people just group up into hostile factions. And if that's what you want, there's going to be people on the losing end of that.
But you asked what's going to happen. I do know that considering the places where these types of not protests, riots and authoritarian mobs are allowed to reign free, like Seattle, those places, if let's say the truckers decide we're not going to go there anymore because it's not safe, the very people that are permitting this violent behavior and not doing a thing governmentally will then say, we have the authority to force you to serve those people. So in one sense, they're being permissive. And then if you try to not come in that area because they're permitting violence, they will then turn around and be authoritarian on the back end. I guarantee you that if anybody tries to not send stuff to Chaz, like let's say Amazon says we're not going to send our packages there because UPS drivers are getting mugged all over the place, I guarantee you the governor of Seattle is going to call that out. And they're going to say, we need to force them to do that.
I wonder if the president could then say executive order, you can't make people be unsafe. That would be something, then we'd see some real stuff happen. If
what I think is the real stuff that should happen is I think Trump should have sent the National Guard in to quell these riots. I think like a week and a half ago.
Yeah. More importantly to me, what I'd like to see happen is just people stop delivering to those places, and businesses say, hey, we're not going to tolerate mobocracy. We're not going to do it. That's just, and make a stand that way. We're not going to have food and, like, hey, all the food and stuff, you got to get your own.
Well, I agree with that to a certain point. The problem with that is when you're talking about a mob, like you said, they're not ruled by rationality. They're ruled by emotion. And the problem with stopping a mob through tactics like that is like, it's like a cancer, right? You cut off all the veins and then it bleeds dry and then it dies, right? Or you can cut it out and get rid of it right away. In the case of a mob, once 2 or 3, 4, 50, 60, 100 people get together, then that mob takes on a brain of its own. And there's no way to stop it from the outside except by withering it and letting it die, or by going in and dispersing it. As soon as those people end up in individual places and they're not all together, they start to think for themselves again. And that's the problem right now, is when you have these factions of people that are gathered together, the best way to prevent that is just to have a National Guardsman standing on the street with a gun, and the people will walk out and they'll go, oh, I should do the curfew thing, and they'll go back home. And then you don't have these mobs gathering. And you don't have to do it with violence. It ends up being the the less violent approach. Just like sometimes the best way to be the least confrontational with Kim Jong-un is to stand up and say, I've got a bigger button and I'm ready to push it if I need to. Because once he knows there's force available, he back down. That's the same with mobs. If you let them sit there, they will fester like a sore, and it will just keep on festering and festering until you finally lance that thing and get it cleaned out. And I think it's not so much the fact that any of these people individually are bad. Get a mob together, they lose their individuality. And I think that's the problem. And I think that's why the National Guard just needs to stand on the street. Just stand there. And it's all done. You don't have to do anything.
You know what? I mean, I think we need to have a talk on how to best handle Chaz and that whole situation.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, because
it's complicated.
It is. And there are several ways and several variables that, you can go to attack this situation. And
right.
With the least, obviously you want to do things with the least amount of pain and force, but you do want to restore law and order. This is something that is just, I've never seen riots. And are there riots in Kentucky by any chance? Have you noticed any?
Not that I know of. I think if they were here, I would have heard about them. I don't think so at all.
No, because Kentucky.
Like even I'm in a small town, but I think if they were anywhere in Kentucky, then I would have definitely heard about them.
You're also an open carry state, and I think that people there own, a lot of.
Yeah, there are a lot of people. Like I said, my wife has like 8 guns at my father-in-law's house and my in-law's house, and we don't have any here because they scare me. They don't scare her.
Yeah, well, she was raised around them, and a lot of, Dennis Prager one time said, he said, the South saved the Union in the 1800s. He said, but the South may save he said the North saved the Union in the Civil War in the 1800s, the late 1800s. He said it's maybe the South will save the Union in the 21st century, because they are the ones who own the firearms and the ones who are in the militias and the ones who will restore law and order. And they do have family, old-fashioned family values that are not as prevalent in other parts of the country. Although their diets aren't necessarily, that Southern diet is not necessarily.
It must be a North conspiracy to try to kill us with the gravy.
Yeah, well, but the gravy and stuff. There's a book called I don't know if you're familiar, Black Rednecks, White Liberals, and it's actually online. You can listen to it.
No,
but it's a lot of the Southern culture, came from the British Isles, like even the Southern, because in Britain it was so cold, they fried everything, and it's a cheap way. Chitlins is also, they were cooking chitlins in the British Isles, and pig's feet and all that other stuff. They were cooking all that stuff in the British Isles long before they came over to America, and they were the ones who occupied America. And there's a whole, and their culture kind of changed, and so there's just a whole diatribe. And we're getting far off the subject about England.
Off our field, yeah.
Even though actually you and I are both probably, I think we have some British heritage. We're both Americans, but I'm assuming your last name and my last name are both.
I think we've got a little bit of the Irish.
Well, yeah, a little bit of the.
Yeah, we've got Irish, Scottish, British, maybe some German. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to make the point that it's really interesting to me, and I mean interesting in the most like tragic way possible, that I haven't done much. Like I told you before, you said we're going to be doing this show about the EDL versus Black Lives Matter. And I said, well, I don't know much about the EDL, but I have heard about the Islamic rape gangs. I've heard about people who groom girls for sexual assault and for molestation, you know, when at a young age, and that it's prevalent. It's like a cultural thing. And my first thought is that if you're unwilling to talk about a person committing an atrocity about another person toward another person because they are a certain ethnicity, race, or religion, that is bigoted. You would think it's like the opposite. Like I like to call it reverse racism. I know you call it anti-racism, but they say we're going to be good to this race, and that's not racist. But it actually is, because you're doing the same thing when you say I'm going to treat somebody differently because they're a certain race, even if it's like I'm not going to talk about how this person did something terrible because they're a Muslim. Or I'm going to talk about how this person did something terrible because it was a white guy and he did it to a black guy. It was a Muslim and he did it to a white teenage girl. No, we can't talk about that. That's Islamophobic. No, that's racist.
And my thing is, I mean, it's how much of this has gone on, and it's just like, I mean, and so many people just.
I'm sure you've talked about it a lot more than I have.
Oh, you know, and I've talked about it to other people, and they just ignore the subject completely. They're completely.
Yeah, I kind of get the sense from you that you've fought this fight many times before, and you kind of feel like you're out of gas a little bit.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, and people just call it racist. The same thing with South Africa. It's like, wait a minute, there's some bad stuff happening there. I'm not saying that it's a genocide, but why do you? My question to them is, why do you downplay it? Why do you downplay it? Why do you upplay one and downplay the other?
Yeah, and the question is like, if I say a person committed an atrocity against another person, and that person happens to be black, then why am I a racist for pointing that out? And you're not a racist when you point out that a white person did something against a black person. Because when I'm talking about it, I say, okay, that white person committed atrocity against a black person. That's terrible. That black person committed atrocity against a white person. That's also terrible. So I'm judging them equally. But when you say terrible with the white person commit atrocity, and we're going to downplay this one, I'm not the racist. You are, because you're judging the situation based on what the script is in terms of where the white guy is standing and where the black guy is standing. And if their roles are reversed and you don't say the same thing, then you're a racist.
And can only white people do crimes that are racially motivated? Are other groups also do crimes that are racially motivated? I mean, it's just kind of silly.
I've been pretty good. I've been pretty good about staying like I used to be really bad about getting wound up and going on flame wars on the internet. Right? I don't do that as much, hardly ever now. I've gotten really good at it, and that is still something that spins me up so freaking hard. What was it you said? Dang it! It spun me up, and I don't even remember what you said.
That only white folks can do things motivated out of racial animosity.
Exactly. That only white people can be racist. Yeah. I'm like, that is just like it's so mind-blowingly, simplistically, like asinine that it almost melts my brain, and I do get emotional about that.
Well, it's a mistreatment because it absolves all other groups of moral responsibility.
Yep, and it's not good for them.
It's blatantly who the hell wants to live under that kind of unfair society? I can't believe that is something that is promoted. And like I said, right now the establishment promotes this kind of garbage, and they promote it, and they have the authority to shut down what they don't like, and it's like the most unfair thing.
You said earlier, like, who would want to live under that system, right? And you would think that, you know, me as the white person, who I'm the only one who can be racist under the system, that it would be terrible for me. But it would be good for the other guy, right? The black person who's now absolved of responsibility, and he can act any way he wants. But actually, in my view, it's worse for him. Because if you say to him, you are absolved of all responsibility, you take away his humanity. Because in humanity, we have actions and we have consequences. And when you remove those consequences, you're telling that person, you're not responsible for your actions. You, sir, are less than human. And that is a terrible way to live. That is an oppressive system that they are under right now. That ideology that is telling them that they're not responsible for themselves is telling them that they are not human, in the same way that we're going to hold those white people to account because they should be responsible for themselves. They should make good decisions. But you, Mr. Black person, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. We're not going to expect that of you. What is that? Is that calling them human in the same way? No, you don't expect a dog to act right, but you do expect a man to act right. You're not calling that person a man if you don't expect them to act in a way that maybe they think something bad happened. But what? You get to go burn everything in your community? That's okay?
Let me stop you there. This riot is different from, I mean, the one riot I remember is the 1992 riots, the Rodney King riots.
Yeah.
They burned primarily their own community. This time, they primarily did not, from what I understand, particularly in LA. They went straight to the wealthier areas like Santa Monica and Beverly Hills. They attacked the Fairfax district and the like. But I want to say
that says a lot more about like focused intention. The psychology of the way that they're acting is different.
But I want to state this. Today, calling someone a racist is stigmatizing them, and with that stigmatization comes a form of economic blacklisting that is very punishing.
Yeah,
and they only punish, and only one group gets punished that way. Now, unless you are you're because there's a whole thing of like Asian people can say whatever they want about white people. But if they say against Latino or particularly against black, they can be absolutely canceled. And if they become too conservative, they say they're siding with white supremacy. So
that's right.
It's just
internalized racism.
Yeah, it's absurd. Anyway, with that being said, is there anything more you want to say before we call this show a day here?
Yeah, just the pointing out of that hierarchy. You know, the Asians are not very far above the white people in terms of the hierarchy. We're the ones who can be crapped on the most, and then the Asians can't really crap on anybody but the white people, and then you go up the chain, and it's a pretty ridiculous. It gets really complicated as to who's better than who. And
it's really the level of who's closest to white supremacy. And if you side with a white person, you are siding with white supremacy, and it's just.
Well, and also when you look at statistical affluence, you know, like because Asians in general they do pretty well, right, economically, so they don't get to say the same things about how they've been oppressed, even though they built the railroads and a lot of them had to die to do it. There was some bad stuff done in this country toward Chinese people.
Yeah, I mean, anytime we get to the past, society's only as just for its time. You and me.
I agree with that 100%. The best way to take care of previous systemic racism or inequality is to set a level playing field.
Nobody has to work on the railroads, and if you want to ride a choo-choo, you can go right ahead. Just,
go for it. All right, man. That's all I gotta say.
And by the way, I wish some Japanese had built some. I hear their railroads. They have the most high-speed railroad. And by the way, when the Japanese, when America, forced their way in, and they first saw a steam engine and a railroad. They had their samurai, just look it up from top to bottom how they can improve it. And nowadays they have the best railroad known to man. With that being said, hey, like and subscribe. What's that?
I was gonna say, when I was working at Mattress, we talked to Sealy. They make, they have their mattress factories, and they said they bring in Japanese people, and there's this culture of kaizen, which is continuous improvement, and that's been the Japanese culture for forever. And it's the reason why they make cars that outcompete ours, because they have this meticulous desire to improve upon yesterday, and it's continuous.
That is an interesting. I'm going to have to look into that. With that being said, Kaizen, like and subscribe, everybody, and share the show if you found it interesting, and leave a comment below. Thank you very much.
Oh, hello.
Hey. Let me see.
This is the